Well, alright everybody, welcome back to another episode of our Building a Universe series, the show in which I take a behind-the-scenes look at my own personal universe mode and perhaps use that to help you create your own. How are y'all doing? My name is Dominic, of course, and today I want to talk specifically about the roster that you may choose for your universe mode. Now, before we get into anything, I do want to preface this by saying that this is my personal take on the roster issue, okay? These are all my opinions. There are a bunch of ways you could tackle your own roster. For instance, I am someone that likes a smaller roster, which I'll get to in a little bit, but if you feel comfortable with having 50, 60, 70 guys on your roster, and if you think you can pull that off, then by all means, go do it. Like I said, this is all subjective. This is all what I choose to do in my own universe mode. But yeah, let's just jump straight into the conversation with this whole roster size dilemma, because I get it. Okay, you may think to yourself, having 60, 70, 80 guys, having so much accessibility, knowing that you can just pluck anybody from the roster anytime. I understand, in your head, you might see that as a good idea. For me, I see that as kind of a bad idea. And again, this is just for me, but I particularly like a smaller roster because I want every single distinct person, every single distinct wrestler to have a role. Okay, I want to know what each person is doing. I want to be able to tell a story, a continuous story with each individual wrestler. Everybody in my show has a purpose. So if you're watching a draft video of mine and you may be wondering to yourself, why isn't wrestler A not being drafted? It's mostly because I don't really know what I want to do with them, and I can't see how they would fulfill a distinct role that I want to proceed with. For instance, you may notice that I don't particularly draft Randy Orton too often because I'm not too sure what I would do with him. He would just feel like somebody sort of wasting a spot on the roster where I can tell more interesting and compelling stories with other guys, okay? If I want to have this veteran story, how Randy Orton is a veteran right now in real life, I would use an actual, veteran that I've had established in the universe mode, like Robert Roode or Rey Mysterio, etc., etc. So there's nobody that I can see facing Randy Orton that I can't just use for somebody else to replace him, and as such, I don't use him. So everybody needs to have their own distinct role, and what I mean by that is, obviously, you don't need to think of how this person is going to end up becoming a main eventer at some point, because not everybody is a main eventer, okay? How I break it down is I know who my mid-card guys are, I know who my main event guys are, and I know who my jobbers are, because sometimes there's people in the universe mode that, well, I just want to job out to people, and obviously, no one really wants to be the jobber, but that's sort of what you have to do, okay? The Heath Slaters of the world, the Jinder Mahals of the world, they are there for a distinct reason. There's a reason why WWE has them. It's because they are meant to lose and help put over somebody else's dominance to showcase what the other competitor can do. And one thing that I notice a lot of is that a lot of people will want to draft all these main event guys immediately, okay? If you ever did some sort of a fantasy draft, you were probably thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I want to get all these huge main event guys. In my opinion, that is not the right way to look at things. You want to know, okay, who are the guys that I can use to build up these other guys? Who are the guys that I could potentially build up? And who are the guys that I can have those people building up facing in the main event, and those main eventers feel natural in that position? Okay, compare it to an actual television show, okay? If there is a character in the show, they usually have a distinct role. If you are watching, I don't know, some sort of FBI show, well then each agent has a specific role, whether somebody has to be the serious guy, someone has to be the leader, somebody has to be the comedic character, etc. And I sort of take that inspiration and put it in the context of my roster. And if you're struggling to think of exactly who you want to draft into your universe mode, well, for me at least, what I do is I will sort of pencil in some booking plans, okay? For instance, I have perhaps some penciled in plans for Ricochet, okay, at WrestleMania, right? It doesn't have to be all the way to WrestleMania, but it's an example, it's an analogy. So I have Ricochet, I know sort of where I want to go with him. I know he wants to be at this point at WrestleMania, and as such, I want to draft him for that role. So if you have something in mind for somebody, and you think you can successfully pull that off, well then by all means, you should draft that person. But understand that you don't have to do that with everybody. Understand that if you don't have necessarily a role for somebody, in the sense of, you know, this big WrestleMania plan, well then just having them as some sort of a jobber or just somebody to fill out that mid-card is not a bad way to look at it either. Okay, you never know who can get really popular with your fan base, okay? Say, for instance, you had Noam Dar on your show, and all of a sudden, the fans sort of seem to like what you're doing with him, and you think, huh, I didn't really plan for this to happen, but you know what? You go with it, and then all of a sudden, Noam Dar becomes this new hot thing in your universe mode, and perhaps even maybe a potential world champion, for instance, that kind of thing. So like I said, in my opinion, you don't want to have your universe mode be too full of roster members, but just know that having a few guys you can experiment with, having a few guys you can just sort of play around with, that's all well and fun. However, then there's also the question of how are you going to handle these specific roster members? And what I mean by that is, how are they going to be portrayed to your audience? Do you want to have the heel and face dynamic? Now, I know there's a lot of people who sort of argue that wrestling has sort of evolved into this world where, you know, there's no more good guys versus bad guys, as Vince McMahon once said. And as such, some people just like to have characters that have that gray scale to them. But in my opinion, and this is just again how I look at it, I do like to distinctly know who I want my faces and heels to be, because I want to use that as an interesting story device. Okay, if I know, for instance, Daniel Bryan is a good guy, he's a big time babyface, and I want him to face off against some ruthless heel so that he can overcome the odds. Okay, him versus, I don't know, Tommaso Ciampa, this brutal, ruthless heel, right? Okay, Daniel Bryan can have this big underdog story in this matchup. Or, on the flip side, Tommaso Ciampa can just beat the absolute hell out of Daniel Bryan, you know, garnering sympathy from the audience. And that's exactly why I like to have that face and heel dynamic that I think is very important. I don't really fall under the crowd of people that like that whole, oh, you don't have to have good guys versus bad guys thing, but that's a whole other kind of topic. Again, this is, you know, what I just do. If you like that kind of thing, you can go for it. But for me, I like to have the heels and face dynamic, because then I can use that dynamic to tell a better story. However, there you got it. Okay, you got this roster. You've got this heel-face dynamic. You know what you want to do. You know your plans. You got long-term goals for all of these perhaps big-time main event guys. But then, you get the news that someone gets released. I know. It sucks. I completely agree. I don't like it when people lose their jobs either. And I don't like it when somebody's not in the game, because then you get put in a situation. And this happened a lot during my 2K19 universe mode. For instance, Tommaso Ciampa was not in the game. And when I heard that, I was flabbergasted, I was shocked, and I was so sad because I had big plans for Tommaso Ciampa, and then all of them had to get immediately scrapped because I didn't know what to do with him. So then I had to struggle internally with trying to figure out, okay, do I get a call from Community Creations, which you can, that's, you know, a valid idea. I still sort of use the Community Creation guys sometimes. In fact, I downloaded a Leo Rush call, and that's, you know, that's kind of worked for me. But, you know, it's not the favorable option in my opinion. If you are using the in-game roster, I think that's better, because then it feels more like the real person. But if somebody's like a call, it's very obvious that it's a call. Even if it's really good, you can sort of tell. Like, you can tell. Because you are now given this option of, do I use a call or do I just write them off of universe mode? And that's more of a judging based on the importance of this character. If you can live without this character, then by all means, I think it's much better to just write them off. Okay, that's sort of what I do. In fact, I'll give you an example with Dean Ambrose in my 2K19 series, because in 2K20, he wasn't going to be in the game because he was John Moxley by that point. So I was put in the position of, what do I do with Dean Ambrose? So what I did was I wrote him out of the story by suffering a big loss. And that's a big way, and that's a good way to write somebody off, okay? They can lose and then just disappear, and people will be kind of okay with that because now they can focus on the guy who beat them. Seth Rollins, in my universe mode, beat Dean Ambrose, and as such, people focused on Seth Rollins while I just subtly pushed Dean Ambrose out of the picture. And also, do not underestimate the draft, okay? I know some people don't particularly love to draft rosters, and I completely get that. I get the idea of not wanting to put up that draft video. But the reason why I put up that draft video is so you know that a certain character will not be in the game anymore. If they're not drafted to the roster, well then you know that you don't have to expect them to be there. Even if I built this guy up and got so excited and just kept building and building and building him up, I can easily just write him off with a massive loss at WrestleMania and then not draft him. Or even, you could also put wrestlers together. You see, if there are two wrestlers that you really want to use, but know that they're not going to be there for the next game, well then why not take advantage of that and create a new temporary tag team just so they can lose to everybody and build that whole tag division if you want to. Hell, you can do that with singles as well. And I know then that there is an end point in that story. However, just like how I know there's an end point in that story, I think that's a good time to end this video. Okay, like I mentioned, just to go through the rundown real quick, I don't believe that you should have a large roster. I believe that everybody on that roster should have a role. I believe that community creations, even though it can be useful and it can be good, perhaps just use it a bit sparingly, and if people are not going to be in the next game, take advantage of that and let them lose. However, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be the end of this video here on GrappleNation, on this Building a Universe mode episode. I know it's been quite a while since I've done one of these, and after seeing some people in the comments saying, hey, I want to watch this again, I figured, screw it, why not? So hopefully you enjoyed. But ladies and gentlemen, if you guys liked it, please let me know by hitting the like button down below. Comment anything you want to comment, subscribe if you haven't already, but if you have, why not hit the bell to be notified of everything we do here on GrappleNation? Of course, my name is Dominic, and have a good day. Bye-bye.